No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Something is about to break.
Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Welcome to episode 16 of About to Break. I'm your host Taylor Hughes, and this episode features my good friend Chris Brank from the production company Let People See. Chris started the company only 5 years ago by himself with a camera and an idea, and has grown it now to a group of over 16 employees. It's absolutely incredible. Of course, as you know, this podcast is not a how-to guide on how to make it. It's a survival guide. And so we're going to talk about not only the ups and the good side, but we're going to talk about the downs and some of the challenges. And Chris drops so much stinking knowledge on this podcast. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, there is huge wisdom here for you. So listen closely to what Chris has to say. You'll certainly be glad you did. I'm exhausted right now. I just got back from a wonderful weekend performing at Amelia Island, Florida, which is gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. Was there emceeing for a group for a few days, met so many cool people, and I got home at midnight last night, woke up, and first thing this morning, Katie and I started working on tiling our bathroom again. So the bathroom saga continues. It's almost done. In fact, we got to get it done by Wednesday because Thursday morning we fly to Seattle for the show with my buddy Zach Gandra and other great folks. The show's called Labels Are Stupid, because they are. And so it's going to be fun. There's going to be some laughter. Might be some magic, some stand-up comedy, and some heart-to-heart conversation about the labels that sometimes we put on ourselves and each other. So if you're in Seattle or the surrounding area, April 1st, April Fool's Day, come to the show. There's a link in the show notes where you can get tickets to that. But that's going to be April 1st. April 29th, I'll be doing an Ellington Hawk live show with my cousin Obie Hughes, who was featured a few episodes back. Good music, some good vibes, and some good times. And then May 10th, save the date, folks. May 10th is our first About to Break live show. That's going to be here in actually in Pomona, California, at an incredible venue. So stay tuned for that. What else do I have to tell you? Thank you again for everyone who's rating and reviewing. If you haven't had a chance to do it, if you listen every week and you love this podcast, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It makes a huge difference. Leave a little review. Let people know what you like about it. And thank you again for the folks who have decided to be producers of the show. If you'd like to be a producer of the show, again, we don't have a sponsor right now. If you love the show, you can kick in a little dough. It really makes a difference. And you can get to that by clicking the Become a Producer button on the homepage at abouttobreakpodcast.com. Okay, I'm done talking. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the wonderful Chris Brank. Hey guys, welcome to About to Break. This episode features the incredible Chris Brank, who is the head, kind of the founder, creator of the broadcast media production company Let People See, who has just blown up over the past few years. And so we're going to talk about some of the successes, but I also know, Chris, just the reality of the type of work that we do. It's not all glitz and glamour. And for someone who spends most of their time behind the camera, helping produce content for other people, I know we're going to have a good conversation here. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Brank.
Thanks, Taylor. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for doing this, man. How long have you been doing production?
All right, so started off doing a few funny videos in college, went and was a youth pastor for about 3 years and did funny videos for the youth group.
Yeah.
And that led into almost 5 years ago to the day, kind of launching out on my own and starting this, what I thought was just going to be me, shooting all day and editing all night, which quickly has turned into a company over 5 years.
So you started off making videos when you were a youth pastor for the students that you were working with. How quickly did you realize that you had a gift for this?
It was when parents, started coming up and being like, hey, can you make a video for our company? And it was always, the most boring thing ever. It'd be, tutorials in warehouses and that kind of thing. But it was real money. And all of a sudden I figured out that I could, youth pastor salaries weren't crazy.
Right.
And I realized that, wait a minute, I can make a week's worth of salary in 2 hours of filming. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what kind of got me started down that path. And I remember I wasn't charging much. And I remember my father gave me this, huge bit of wisdom. I loved buying gear. I mean, I think a lot of us are gearheads in whatever part of life we're in.
I have a case that I carry my entire show in because I saw you had the case about 6 months ago, and I
Pelican
geeked
case.
out. That Pelican case, I went home and bought that case on Amazon immediately because, yeah, we like gear.
Oh yeah, Pelican cases. Yes.
So your father,
it.
was it your father, you said?
Well, he was like, if you charged money for your videos, you could pay for your gear. And I was like, it was like a light bulb. I mean, it's ridiculous to say, but in my mind, it was like, oh my gosh, I can charge for videos and have that pay for the gear. And so
you started off, you were doing this just because it was something you were passionate about and you loved it. And you needed the gear to create the content that you wanted to create.
Absolutely,
and then all of a sudden a light bulb went off and went, oh my goodness, I can actually... At this point, I guess you weren't even thinking you could make a living at it. You were just thinking you could cover your costs by charging for videos.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it was fun. It was fun to... Gear's very expensive.
Right.
And so it was out of my league. And then so when I started charging, I was like, well, I could get better equipment. So I remember my first year in business, technically a lot of us I was totally in the negative because all I did was spend all the money on gear.
Right.
And I remember having an accountant at that time, and he said, you need to don't buy as much gear as money.
you need to make more money than you spend.
Buy. So that's called revenue, and that's how you can make a living with it. And I was like,
Right.
oh, yeah, that makes sense. But there's so much new gear coming out, so.
Right. Well, and in this type of industry, there is that challenge too. I guess it would be like a realtor, who hasn't sold a house yet, but he's got to have a nice car to drive people around in.
Absolutely.
You can't show up to a gig where they're paying you a bunch of money and not have good equipment.
Right. And I think part of what enabled me is that there was a bend in technology, and you'll find a lot of production companies like us are anywhere from 5 to 7 years old, maybe even a little younger. There are tons of production companies, and a lot of it is because of the rise of DSLR, movie making. The Canon 5D Mark II came out that had incredible, visuals. You had like the depth of field effect, and before you couldn't find that unless you were filming on film, with. Right. And so that kind of opened up, all of a sudden for $2,000, you could get this camera filming, quote unquote, Hollywood quality.
Yeah.
And there were tons of companies like me that started up because of that much lower entry point.
Yeah, I remember at NAB, I saw one of the photographers for Saturday Night Live was talking about the Canon. And I guess they used the 5D, and I think at the time, this was back when it was like the 5D and the 7D. And they used both of those to film the intro for Saturday Night Live.
Yes, and it was revolutionary. I mean, it was what? It was that realization that, okay, once Saturday Night Live does it, it's like, okay, it's official. That's a professional is choosing it. And it opened the floodgates. Yeah,
and not only the price point being something people could live with, but also the portability and, for someone like yourself who does a lot of event photography and to not have this big intrusive thing that you're carrying around and yet be able to capture what you need.
Right. I mean, that's what launched us. First, I started with the Canon 7D. It was the biggest deal in the world when I got it,
You and I haven't had this conversation, but I've heard some filmmakers and photographers challenged by the fact that because this equipment has become so accessible, now everybody in the world thinks that they're a photographer.
No, that's definitely true. And there are a lot more videographers and photographers now than certainly there were 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
There are a lot more people calling themselves filmmakers and doing videos. I mean, you think about, we don't do weddings anymore. But wedding videos now, I mean, there are, for every wedding that you're doing, there's 10 different videographers that can do that wedding.
Oh, yeah.
Before, that just wasn't the case. And that's a good example of an easy event for people to get into. Wedding, everyone wants a video now, and it can look incredible.
It really has changed. I think once cameras on cell phones became really good, now people are, how has that changed? The fact that someone's got a great video camera on their iPhone, and that every video we see of a kid playing or a dog running through a park is at a higher quality. How has that changed things?
2 years ago we put 2 iPhone shots, and this is when probably the iPhone 5S, put 2 iPhone shots in our demo reel and asked people to kind of like a competition, like said, hey, if you can figure out which 2 shots it is, we'll give you $100 gift certificate. And no one got it. No one. It's slightly insulting because, our cameras now are much more expensive.
Right.
I was talking to the team a couple days ago about this, how quickly things are changing because, you can film 4K on your iPhone now and edit really cool little promos right there.
Right.
And so we're going to have this generation of kids who are 15 to, anywhere from 12 to 20 years old right now coming into the workforce, and their examples are going to be things that they've shot on their iPhones and edited on their iPhones. And are we going to be the people that are like, no, you've got to shoot with this big camera and you've got to pull it into Final Cut Pro X, and they're going to be rolling their eyes thinking that they have to go to this computer to edit when they can put out much better things, in their pockets.
I love that attitude too of like, we want to use the best gear we can. We want to create the best product we can. But at the end of the day, if an iPhone gives me the shot I need, that's what it's all about. I remember being in bands in high school, and guys, before they learned a chord, they went out and spent $1,000 on an electric guitar,
Yeah.
It's like, if you can shoot it on a little DSLR, then when you got the big boys, you can do what you need to do.
That's true, and that's what we're finding now. Especially, we can talk about how 5 years ago when I started, when you had a video, you either put it on your website,
right,
or YouTube, or maybe TV. But that's really the only 3 channels per se. And now there's so many more channels with Facebook and with Snapchat and with Instagram, that the need for content is you just need more of it. You don't need 1 2-minute video. You need 5 30-second videos that you can spread out throughout 3 or 6 months.
Wow.
And so in that, you're seeing budgets move from, okay, I've got $20,000 for one video to I've got $20,000, but I need 10 videos. And so there is still this people perceive it. When we film things with our nice Canon cinema cameras, and then something DSLR, people can tell the difference. But, it's getting harder and harder to justify that price because they need so much content. They need so much of it.
This is the catch-22 of the more advanced we get in technology, the more social media we have. It's like we have all these tools we never had before, and yet it changes. The game is constantly changing.
Right.
And, for someone who's in the business of providing this kind of art, you really do have to stay on your toes, just like you were saying, you were talking with your team and recognizing the change in the landscape and what moves do you need to make.
It's true. Instagram right now is doing stories at the top, and if you're not at the top with a story every day, no one rarely scrolls down to see your stuff. They're just kind of going through the stories now. That's been around 3 months, maybe 6 months.
Oh yeah
It's intense. It's a fun industry to be in, but it's also very difficult not to get immediately left behind if you just decide, I'm going to take a break for 6 months. And then you come back and Snapchat exists.
Right. Or if you spend all your time investing in one form of social media. How many people built this massive audience on MySpace, and now MySpace is nothing?
Right. So that's what we've been trying to do now is content that can be used in a myriad of different places.
I'm just thinking about this conversation that we're having here, and that 5 years ago you started off with just thinking, hopefully I can cover the cost of my gear.
Correct.
Do you remember the first paying gig you ever did?
Yeah, I do. It's for a client that we still have now, and he's a great guy. His name's Dan Walshman. He's kind of a speaker, author, consultant type guy.
Yeah. And
created 4 2-minute videos for his website. And he paid me, and I bought a boom mic, and I bought 2 lights with it.
Yeah.
There it was. And that we have had so many of those original clients stick around with us, even from going from just me to now a staff of, 15.
You have a staff of 15 people 5 years into your business.
Yeah.
And you guys just opened a facility, right? You just opened a larger workspace?
Yeah, so we have about 4,400 square feet in Greenville, which we were in 400 square feet a year ago.
So 10 times the size.
Yeah. I tell they get tired of me telling me this, but I always tell them every day, I've never grown a video company before.
Right.
And so there's all these incredible little lessons that I'm learning every single day. It's a rush.
And how does that change, when it was just you by yourself and all you had to do was, cover your bills? You know what I mean? You go from I want to be able to pay for my gear to, hey, maybe I can make a living at this and I can, let go of the other job, to now you've got 15 people whose livelihood is dependent upon what you do. Did that ever get to you as being a business owner who's also a content creator?
Yeah, it's incredibly scary, you know, especially when now 5 years in, I'm kind of learning the slow seasons and and when seasons are awesome and when seasons are slow. And the way we've built our model is we want our model so people on staff are employees and salary.
Okay.
Which is unlike a lot of video production companies where you might have a producer and a few people on staff, and then when a shoot comes, you know, you crew up for it.
Right. All freelance and
correct.
People
but what we
people
found
have more
out
like a day rate that way, right?
Right. Yeah. So, but because of the way technology has shifted, you have people now that can shoot and edit and might be just as good at both, which wasn't possible 10 years ago. You know, you kind of picked a career path and went with it.
That's true.
But now you've got people that, you know, our staff, if they're not out shooting, everyone's in editing. And we have certain people that do more of both. So in other words, the expenses stay the same, whether we're shooting or not.
Okay. Yep.
And that's the model we've built. And that's also a very scary model because regardless of whether work is in, the bills are there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, especially with payroll. I mean, everyone knows kind of how that is, but it is uncharted territory with us. And we're realizing things like, you know, right now we actually have a staff of 19. And many of those are not many, probably 6 or 7 of those are part-time.
Yeah.
And what we've learned in the past 6 months is that, you know, part-time isn't necessarily good for the business. We can't invest in them. They can't invest in us. We can't put them on bigger projects because they might only be in on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons.
Yeah, and their focus is always going to be, you know, divided because, if they're 20 hours with you, they've got to have 20 hours somewhere else.
Correct, yeah. And so that's, you know, here we are 5 years in, and 3 weeks ago I realized, wait a minute, we don't have a path for these part-time people to go full-time, you know, or like there was no, you know, we just brought them in because the need was there.
Yeah.
And so it's little things like that are just like, I mean, it's a blast, but man, there's a lot of pressure and stress on, you know, how do you build a company? How do you do it the right way? And how do you set the culture?
For folks who haven't met you yet, Chris, I mean, you're very young, you and your wife, right? I mean, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I'm 29. I'll be 30 in 29 3/4, you know.
So you're 29 years old. You have a 4,400 square foot facility with 19 staff. Only 6 of those are part-time. Mm-hmm. And I think people, you know, if they were to look at your Facebook page, you know, go to Let People See on Facebook, it just looks like, man, these guys got this life that just is awesome. I mean, you're working and you got money coming in and you're creating content that's fun, because you guys do fun just off around the office videos too, which are great.
Yeah.
And I think people don't understand the work that goes into it, because in this type of industry, you have to be a people person. When other people get stressed out in the event, you have to be the voice of reason. You have to stay calm. You have to say, hey, we're going to get it done, even though as you're talking to them, you're realizing I'm going to be up all night making this happen. How do you maintain who you need to be in front of people and also maintain this incredible work ethic so that you can have that?
Right. The trick that a lot of us, you know, like you and myself and a lot of people who have started companies, we're all self-starters.
Right.
No one has to tell us to go chase after something. You know, we're not going to ever just sit and wait for someone to tell us what to do. Yep. It's very rare for us to ever be in that mindset. If it is, it's usually because we've been working too long and we're just like, just give me a day off. But even that is rare. You'll have what I find myself is I'll get 3 hours off and I'm like, okay, let me check emails.
Yeah.
What's something to do? Which part of that is an issue we need to fix. We need to learn how to rest. But what I'm finding is that if you don't grow with like-minded people, then you just quickly turn into every other company that's out there with you are the sole talent. Mm-hmm. And people come to you, and then you just need to teach other people how to do that, but they're just waiting on your command. And so it's been a hard road, but we've found people who are. I've found people that are better than me at shooting. I've found people that are better than me at editing, and to bring them in and train them in a go-getter attitude. There's just some things that just cannot be taught, you know?
Right.
And if you have people that are self-starters, they're going to go and they're going to work incredibly hard for you. And if you add people that aren't, it's going to create more manager headaches for you.
Yeah. How crazy too, that moment where you go from being just solely a content creator to being a manager of other creative people.
I mean, that's the number one thing I do all day is and everyone is completely different. You cannot manage a creative the same way.
Right.
And it's very hard when the business world operates from 8 to 5. Creatives rarely operate from 8 to 5. So how do you get creative juices to flow in somebody at 8:30 when an edit needs to start?
Right. I always say nothing great happens before 5 p.m. Like in the creative realm, you know? Like,
Totally. Yeah.
Have you ever done an event at like 8 a.m.?
Terrible. I mean, you're just ready to go back to sleep and drink coffee.
Yeah.
And even now we're still working through, like our office hours are 8 to 5. But is that what's best? You know, gosh, we found ourselves growing with particularly agencies and brands that have that need for a lot. Like, for instance, agencies have access to 20 clients and they all need videos.
Yeah.
And if we can be kind of a one-stop consistent solution for them, that's great. But a lot of what that is just building relationships with a couple people.
That's so key, man.
Of.
No matter if I talk to musicians or actors or comedians, so much of it comes down to just being a good person and connecting with other folks. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a website, I've got videos, I've got social media stuff, but 90% of my work comes from someone I met at another event or someone recommended me, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that you just said that, because I think a lot of entertainers or artists don't understand, because a lot of our work is project or event based. You know, for you, someone wants a video produced, that's a one-time gig.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully they'll hire you for something else, right?
Right.
So it's almost like going back to the realtor example. You know, a realtor does all this work leading up to one day that they eventually get a paycheck. You know, they work, think about it, when you buy a house or you sell a house, you work with this realtor for a couple months sometimes, and then hopefully at the end of it, they're going to get paid. You don't pay them a dime until the end.
Mm-hmm.
Project or event-driven business, you're working for this client to the point where they're eventually going to pay you. And if you just focus on getting every individual client yourself versus, like what you're saying, connecting with agencies or organizations that need content produced on a regular basis, it's a lot harder road to walk on than it is to say, hey, I'm going to connect with this agency who's got 20 people a day calling them looking for what I do.
Yeah.
And rather than me trying to find 20 people a day to call me, I'm going to try to be the first person they recommend when they get the call.
You know, now looking back, it's a brilliant business plan, but I've got to be completely honest. You know, it happened upon us. Like it
Yes.
didn't. You know, that now that I realize, like, oh, this is why we've been, you know, there's been some
Isn't
success.
that funny? This is why it worked.
Yes.
Or why it's working now, you know?
Yeah. And so now we're starting to target that a little bit more. Like, let's find people, you know. But before, it was completely God's provision. Like, it's just complete, you know, those relationships have just fallen into our lap in a lot of ways. I mean, we've worked very hard to maintain those. But I can't exactly say, you know, there's so many good video production companies in town. You know, most of our work, we're flying to New York, you know,
Right.
sometime, you know, LA next month. And there are tons of good production companies there. So what is it that, you know, triggers somebody's heart or mind to go with Let People See? I don't always know. I don't know what it is, but I know it stems from those relationships and trust that people build. So,
you know, Seinfeld talks about comedians, and people say, oh, you're so lucky because you have this job that allows you freedom and you get to travel and you do all this. And Seinfeld's approach is, he's like, no, at one point you quit the 9 to 5. You know, at one point you took the risk. At one point you jumped out there and you went for it. And now you're doing something no one else does because you back then did something no one else would do.
yeah.
So what was that transition like for you when you said, okay, I'm going to take this from something I'm passionate about and something that's a hobby I sometimes get paid for, and I'm going to try to make this what I do for a living? What was that process like for you?
I actually went and looked back at the email the other day. You know, there was it was a boys group home, a ministry that we were doing some work with, and they said they wanted me to do a video a month for a year. And
Oh, wow.
like it was like $500 a month
Yeah,
to make a video. And at that time, that was enough to cover my rent. Nothing else but my rent.
right.
And I went for it. I said, that's enough to cover my rent. I think I could probably scrape together something else. Let's do it. And I remember I thought at that time, you know, I needed a backup plan.
Yeah.
And so I also went to work at an Apple store. The worst decision of my life. I was 2 weeks later, I had to quit because I was paying someone else $15 an hour to come edit for me while I went to work at Apple making like $11 an hour.
Yep.
So quit within 2 weeks, and it has been, but it was that I've always, and my wife especially knows that I'm a huge risk taker, and you don't get anywhere without taking a risk. And the bigger the risk, of course there's a bigger chance of failure, but there's also a much bigger chance of reward.
Yeah.
And it's, never have we hired someone full time when we had the work to hire them full time.
Wow. Okay. Wait
never
a minute.
that kind of.
So it was never, hey, we've got this project, we need to add a person to it. It's always in anticipation of the work to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very risky thing to do, but relationships aren't as risky as if you're dealing with, cryptic compute, if you know relationships are working and you're building those and that clients are coming, it's much easier to risk than if you're just working with, for instance, when we were doing weddings.
Yeah.
If you have a repeat bride client, that's not a good thing.
Right.
They keep coming to you every 3 or 4 years needing a video for their wedding, then
there's a problem.
Yeah, you got a problem. So that's why we stopped doing that,
Wow.
That's why we moved to other places. So
I love what you're saying about how you've never hired someone full time when you had the work for them.
Right.
In business, and I saw this working in an office, is that what happens is you have people who are on a team and there's so much work that needs to be done, and probably more work than you have people for. And yet the managers don't want to teach someone else or train someone else or reproduce in someone else what they're doing because they think, well, it needs to get done right now and it'll get done at less quality, or it's going to take me more time to teach them, because they didn't hire people before there was the big need and spend time investing in them. And now,
that's what managers are either stuck in this. They don't want to grow because it would be inconvenient. And it is. Growing is incredibly inconvenient.
Right.
Or they don't want to do that because of the profits they can rake in. And for me, I've never been concerned with because I still love buying gear. I still love buying Pelican cases. So all the profits, I just flip back around, and
right.
And we either hire people or get some cool gear to play with or move into a new space. But, if I were concerned about raking in a profit to buy more things for myself, then I wouldn't be building a company. I'd just be doing videos and making a lot of money and staying up all night and wreaking havoc on my family and the employees that I do have, overworking them. But, you have, at some point you have to choose. Do you, especially starting out, are you going after profits, or do you want to build something really good for your employees and your clients? Because if you're chasing after money, you're going to make different decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Make a lot of different decisions than you would if you're trying to build an awesome culture for people to work at, awesome products.
Chris, this conversation is so encouraging to me because I love this podcast. I love having conversations with artists. And one of the challenges, though, that I've always had with my friends who do what I do is that they don't want to work. You know what I mean? In my industry, the focus that a lot of performers have is when you're on stage. It's all about when you're on stage. But the reality is 99% of what I do is when I'm off stage. It's getting the gig, it's prepping for the gig, it's writing the material, it's practicing it, sending emails and contracts and all of that stuff. And I have so many friends right now who are struggling because they're not working, but it's because they don't have this business mindset that you're talking about here. You know what I mean? Like I just love the approach of, hey, I love art, I love creativity, I want to do it. In order to keep doing it, I need to be smart. And I need to be on behalf of other people. You realize that's a unique thing you're bringing here, right?
And isn't that weird? I mean, it makes such sense for a formula to success. Like, I mean, how many emails for pyramid schemes or whatever you want to call it do you get this? Do you want to make a lot of money working part time from home?
Yeah.
Then here it is, and the products are always subpar. It's never about the products,
right?
It's about how much money you can make.
Yeah, if you get 3 people and they get 3 people.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I always try to, because it's usually some friends or some friends of a friend. I always kind of try to tell them, like, look, if you're passionate about what you're selling or what you're making or what you're creating, pour all your effort into that. And money's probably going to come from it. If it doesn't, you're still doing what you love. But if you're just trying to make money, then you're probably in the wrong industry.
Oh, dude, this is so good. Okay, I saw earlier on your Facebook page the what does the cover photo say? It says something about like because your title of your company is Let People See, and then your tagline is the awesome things you're doing, right? Something like that.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
I just love that. I love that you're saying, hey, we can help you market what you're already doing. You're
Right.
already doing this thing. And I think so many people have it the other way around, where they're trying to, I mean, like you said, with the pyramid scheme, they're trying to sell something that people don't want. They're trying to market something that isn't of value to people. And you know, like you're saying here, like put the work in to create the thing, and that will open doors for you.
Yeah, and even in video, I think that's the. I mean, you see it on almost every video production website. Is like, we're storytellers,
Right.
and we're gonna tell your story. Well, in our industry, you know, what we've seen is that people are already telling their stories. You know, it's just not clearly portrayed as such. You know, you might go on a website of someone doing awesome things, and if there's terrible pictures or videos, they're still doing awesome things.
Right.
You know, and to use the phrase, you just got to let people see it.
Dude.
So anyway,
I'm just in awe that 5 years ago you decided to give this thing a go, and where you're at right now. You know, in 5 years to grow this much, I'm sure there's been some times that were challenging. Do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about some of those challenges that were associated with, you know, making the decision to do this and being married and having it not just be your decision and that kind of thing?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that's where all the growth has come. None of our growth has ever come from the times when we're like, you know, in multiple cities shooting all the time. You know, the growth comes from when we're from those very difficult times. And, you know, ever since the beginning, we're always faced with those decisions, you know, like, this is a nicer truck than we've ever bought before. Can we afford it? Do we buy it? This is a nicer camera than we've had. I mean, there's always some fear with growth. And I came to think of it this way about 2 months ago. I was, you know, now that we've grown to a staff of 15, when it's slow, there's always been a slump. And now the slump gets bigger, you know, because you have to dig deeper into credit lines and that kind of thing than I did last year.
Right.
And I know that, you know, for me as a believer, God's intention is to bless us, right? He wants the best for us. However, I've read Job, right? And I know David's story, you know, and I know so many other stories in the Bibles where God does bless, but it's always not the way we think. It's not always through prosperity.
Right.
Like, I know that God might, you know, that having a massive company might not be what God's plan for me is down the road.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you know, that scared me for the longest time. I was like, okay, I know God wants to bless me, but does that mean growing the company or not? You know, what did God, you know, and so there's a lot of little micro decisions in that, but it came to a head about 2 months ago where I just realized, you know, the only reason, let's say God did let people see away, and over time it just dwindled away. The only reason that's scary is if I loved the business more than I did God. Because I know that God has plans to, you know, to bless us and prosper us and do what's best for us and draw us closer to Him. And so if I love the company more than I love God, then that's very scary because God could take it away in order to bless me.
Yeah.
And I don't want that kind of blessing, you know, if that's my mindset. And so I had to come to this place where I was like, okay, God, I want to love you more than that. So I don't want to be scared anymore going into decisions. And there's so much fear with starting and running a company. Oh yeah. Especially when you're at the top, there is so much fear. But I'm trying to get that, because fear affects it. It affects how you talk to people. It affects how you deal with relationships. It makes you scared to do something edgy because you might lose it. Right. It makes you scared to push boundaries. But I don't want that to be any part of what we're doing. And so that's the process. Even now, the challenge that I'm going through is how can I take some fear out of the equation so we can be just as risky as I was 5 years ago.
That's huge.
It's incredibly
huge
risky,
because,
you know, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think for, you know, us creatives, fear is a huge thing. And I think sometimes it's the fear of what if I give it a go and I fail? But I also think for a lot of creative people, it's not like, you know, there's a lot of people who are in industries where maybe they're manufacturing a product that they don't feel passionate about, but it's a good product that helps people and that makes them money. But it's not, you know, at the end of the day, if someone doesn't buy this widget, my soul isn't crushed because of it. Right. You know, you know what I mean? But by the very nature, when you are using a gift or a talent or an ability or a passion and you're monetizing that, I do think people are scared to death that when they package this all up and they present it, whether it's music or it's film or it's photography, this is a piece of me that I'm putting on a platter and I'm saying, would you like this? And if they don't like that, it's not just that it wasn't their flavor. It's that they don't like me. So it's almost like if people don't accept your art, they're not accepting you. And I think that is a huge fear that holds people back. So I love that you're talking about taking risks and not letting that fear drive you.
I tell that a lot of our team, a lot of our team are very young creatives, anywhere from 23 to 29. And you have to pour all of your emotions into what you create.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be you have to pour all of your creativity and every last ounce of emotion that you can into what you create. Mm. But then you also have to learn, part of being a mature creative or entertainer or whatever, you also have to learn what moments to completely leave your emotions at the door.
Yeah.
And take feedback and criticism and then pick them right back up again and create something else. Mm. We just had to go through 24 rounds of edits on a Clark's piece we filmed in New York City.
24 rounds?
Yeah, 24 rounds. So, and some of those are major scope changes. Like we don't like, do a brand new song and these kind of things.
Right.
And so our, Brandy, one of our awesome editors who's been with us for a year she'd have to do that. She'd pour all of her emotion into an edit and then she'd have to bounce back. She had to do that 24 times.
Right. And a lot of times you're working, I'm guessing, in the little bit of production stuff that I've done, you're working with people who don't know what they want.
Correct. Yeah.
Until they see it's like, show it to me and I'll tell you when you get it right.
Yeah, it's much easier to react to a video than to be like, oh, let's create this from scratch.
Right.
But so
she goes through 24 rounds of edits.
Yeah.
And you're talking about she's putting her passion into it.
Each time I'd have to tell her, and she knows it by now, and they all know it. That's the culture we've created. Yeah. That it's okay. It's okay if people don't like this. It's not that they don't like you.
Yeah.
It's just they don't like this. Now, that doesn't mean the difference there is you can either become cold and cynical and your work suffers, or you can be just as bright and hopeful and creative, knowing that people just, there is a separation there. They're not saying they don't like you. They're just saying they don't like this work, and that's okay. You just have to flip a switch for a minute. But that switch is, if you aren't consciously aware that that's happening, then this industry is going to destroy you.
Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it happen to so many people.
Yeah, and it still hurts. It never doesn't hurt. It's not like you can flip a switch and turn into a robot. You realize what's happening and you go from there. But
when did you guys get married?
So I met Corinne 3 months after I started this thing. I went out on my own, and so we've been married for almost 4 years. Been dating for basically the entire time this thing has been up and running. It's the third person in the marriage.
Yeah, that's wild. So your relationship is almost the same age as your company. Mm-hmm. Oh wow, that's fascinating. I just think about Katie and I. Katie and I started dating in high school. We were 15 and 16. We dated for 5.5 years. We've been married now for 14 years.
That is so cool. When you were 15 and 16?
Yeah, it's wild, man. Yeah. So I started dating Katie when I was 15, and I'm 36 now. So I've literally spent more than half of my life with her. But I think about how much growth, in all that time, the last 3 years of our life have been so crazy and so different and so wonderful. And I just think how wild is it that, that you guys got married and then jumped on this journey together. What's that been like? Any advice for guys who are trying to make a career, trying to build a business, and also trying to build a relationship? Anything you've done right, or likewise, we can learn from anything you've done wrong.
Yes, please learn. I think what I've learned Corinne, has been very involved at certain points, and now she works in a ministry, and she's more involved in that. But especially when you're married, whatever you bring home really does affect the other person.
Yeah, totally.
So if you're stressed, and even if you're trying to hide, it will come out, and stress does carry over.
Yep.
and whatever you're thinking, there's such a bleed over that I think I was kind of blind to for a while. And finances they've always been crazy. They're crazy now. They were crazy 3 years ago when they weren't at the level, and they were crazy when we were trying to get married.
Yeah.
And I was on my own. There were those questions of, can we get married? Well, I don't know. Can we afford this apartment? I have work for this month. So but how do you sign a 1-year lease?
Right. Oh my goodness.
All of those.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't realize for the longest time how much, if I came home just worried and stressed, I didn't realize how much of an effect that did have on my wife.
Yeah.
And now I see it. And it's not that you can't hide it either. You know what I mean? Because she's your wife.
It doesn't help to ignore it.
Yeah. So what you have to do for not only your sake but their sake is fix it. Is you have to find some rest, and you have to figure out what's stressing you out, and then not be worried about it anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of times I've tried to think about blogging or whatever about success, but the fact is I can't take God out of the mix. It'd just turn into a Christian success, whatever, a Christian business blog. Because I feel like without that foundation and that faith, my life would be a very stressful wreck. And there'd be no foundation or no hope really,
Wow.
And so that's what my wife is always good at reminding me is, when you start a business or you start whatever on your own, if you're an entrepreneur, especially for men, what I've found is it consumes you. It is you. Mm-hmm. There's so much of it that is just, you put your whole thing, all your identity into this thing. My wife is so good about bringing me out and be like, either go mow the lawn, go play with the dogs.
Yeah.
There's so much more to life than what than this. But in your mind, it's the company, the thing that I'm building is the most important thing there is. And God recently told me, he said, he said, Corinne, my wife's name's Corinne. He said, Corinne is the greatest gift I'm ever going to give you. And in my mind, I was chasing after some kind of material or company success, being like, well, if God gave me this giant company, or if he gave me whatever, then that'd be the greatest gift. And God was like, no, you've already gotten the greatest gift. You've already gotten it. So enjoy that for as long as I give her to you. And everything else is just kind of like icing on the cake. But the cake's still there. Just depends on and Corinne's already the icing, but do you want thicker icing, or sometimes the icing won't be as thick, but you already have your cake. So enjoy and eat it,
Katie, this week, I very similarly, she is always the one who pulls me out of my funk, which I get in quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's just, this is such a good reminder, because we talked this week, and it's like 3 years ago, it was, hey, want to be great when this happens, and then that happened. And it was, want to be great when this happens, and that happened. And want to be great when we're doing this, and then that's happening. And she just, this week, was like, you know what? Are you going to be happy when you get that? you think that's going to be the thing that does it?
Right.
And it's just such a good reminder. I'm sure you love film and story and all of these things, but how many stories are the guy was looking for something? Mm-hmm. He goes on this journey to find this thing, and it comes full circle back to the thing he was looking for was there the whole time. It was the thing that he neglected in pursuit of trying to find, what that could provide. So
yeah, I think that's the difference between joy and happiness.
Yeah,
joy is a very small percentile will come of it from what you do for a living. It will, it can, but happiness, joy usually comes from the much deeper things in life, like wife and family and kids, and happiness can come and go pretty easily with a company.
Yeah,
you book a gig and then it gets canceled.
Right. Oh yeah. I think anybody in any industry, you go back to like 2008. Man. I don't know why I'm talking about realtors so much, but realtors in 2007, it was raining money, and everybody was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm so glad I got into this industry. And then 2008 hits, and people are looking for ropes to tie nooses. You know what I mean? It's like in any industry, there is this element of feast or famine, and there's going to be times when it's great, and there's going to be times when it's challenging. And I just think you're bringing so many good thoughts about don't have your identity tied up in what you do, and yet still give your all to it. Still try to provide for people what. Do the best you can do for them, and at the same time realize that at the end of the day, that doesn't define you. And sometimes, I had a friend the other day challenge me that, you've got to find joy in the making, like just creating the thing. I don't know about you, but when you're working on a video, man, and like sometimes you're doing one of those revisions and you're going to take it to a client and they're going to have more revisions, but in the process, you just go, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just taking that moment in the midst of the process and separating the fact that this is how we make money and just going, hey, right now, this is perfect.
Right. And even if it's in the little things like, hey, you know what? I'm going to send this off and then I'm going to play ping pong in the back room.
I love it.
And that's, it's funny, but that's where my day might be going crazy, but I'll grab a guy and go play ping pong. I'm like, all right, life's going to be okay.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yes.
I think part of that, too, is that our most of our life now is spent in front of a screen, and there's just something about taking 30 minutes and getting face-to-face with a human.
Yes.
And remembering,
I'd love to talk about this for a little bit, the screen thing.
Let's do it.
Do you mind?
Oh, I'd love to, man.
So what, and there are a ton of studies being done right now about people being sucked into their screens I see it especially because everyone that we employ and me, we're all millennials.
Right.
And the phone is kind of all consuming. It's always there.
Yeah, it's like an extension of your body.
Yes. And so I'm doing this thing now where I didn't delete Facebook. I didn't think that would fix the problem, but I have Facebook, but I no longer scroll. Because for me, scrolling was taking up so much of my time, just mindlessly scrolling when I was bored. And the root of the problem is that we're never bored anymore. Like when we're riding in a car, when I was a kid, I'd look out the window and imagine and create. And now, if you're riding in a car, you're looking at your phone, you're watching a movie. There is no creating. I feel like over the next few years, we're going to see a serious lack of creativity and imagination because no one is ever bored anymore.
Right.
And man, so much comes out of boredom. So much incredible creativity comes out.
Creation comes from boredom.
Yeah.
And we have taken off this natural thing that we've been given, this gift of creativity, and we've exchanged it for being consumers of everything.
Yeah.
So for the handful of us that are creating content, that's a great place to be in from a business standpoint because people always want more.
Yeah.
But from a society standpoint, yeah, like you're saying, what's going to happen when people forget how to wonder? I remember back, years ago when I was working with the youth ministry at a church, and we set up this guys' night, and this was not that, maybe 5 years ago. We're like, we're gonna do a guys' night. It's gonna be awesome. And so we had a barbecue, and we're cooking burgers and dogs. And then we set up like volleyball nets, and we set up like we had footballs out there, and like just all these games, right? Just stuff that you could do for fun, right?
Yeah.
And people showed up, and they just stood there, and they were like, "What are we gonna do?" Because they wanted a program. They wanted someone to tell me, "This is what you do." Go listen to this person talk about this,
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing, like you're saying, I think we're seeing a generation that doesn't know how to be creative and how to just go out and do something.
And I recently, like 2 or 3 days ago, I got like a flip phone. I still have my iPhone.
Yeah.
But I wanted, I want my wife to be able to get in touch with me if I need it, but I wanted to be able to leave my phone somewhere.
Dude,
to where it's not
awesome
buzzing off the hook, and I only gave the number.
Awesome. You got like a burner phone.
Yeah, I call it my off the grid phone.
Dude, you're Jack Bauer.
which is funny because it's still a phone, but I call it being off the grid. But
I
I'm not
know.
Really.
But there is that whole thing of like, I'm like right now I'm really hoping at one point you have a conversation with your wife and you're like, I'll see you in a couple hours, and then you just throw the phone in a trash can.
Yeah.
I always love that.
Yes. I'd love that too. And that's it's very hard it's very hard to leave your phone somewhere.
Right.
But I love the feeling that when you realize that you've forgotten where your phone is.
Yeah.
Or you realize you've left it for 3 hours and you don't care.
Yeah.
Man, it's incredible how rare that is these days. But I think that it's at the expense of our creativity and imagination. So that's what, and in talking with all these, I've got 15, 20 millennials. I see it in them, and I see that, we're in the middle, we're in downtown Greenville. It's super cool, but it's also super urban. And they go from like their concrete, they walk down onto concrete sidewalks up to a concrete garage. And then they go into their apartment where it's just their yard is a parking lot. Like, man, and then they just, they're on their phones all night or whatever. And it's like, man, they really need to see trees. I do love the idea of Skywalker Ranch. I've never been there, but that these people that
I don't know about this.
Skywalker Ranch.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
It's where Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound exist. So George Lucas bought and I could be wrong, but I think he bought 3,000 acres.
Wow.
Outside of LA, right? And he wanted to do it as a filmmaker's retreat, basically. And that's where a lot of those offices are. But I love the idea that these people that are geniuses and working on computers and in technology all day can step out and instantly be in the middle of nature, right?
Yeah.
Not in a tree hugging way, but just just stepping away a little bit from technology and being reminded that grass does grow outside of a program. That's where we're, over the next 2 or 3 years, that's where I'm trying to I'm taking our company in a certain direction. I realize that because of our jobs, because of what we do, which is creating videos, you have to be on a computer all day.
Yeah.
But recognizing that might be good for your soul and for you as a human.
Yep. And as a creative individual, there is this element of you have to go out and live life because you draw from your experience.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we talk about putting everything we have into our art, we're putting in, if you're a songwriter, you're putting in experiences of how you felt when you were at this coffee shop and that person walked in. But if you don't ever go out and live life, how can you create anything?
And yeah, what would your routine be like if all you talked about was what you saw on Facebook or what articles you read?
Oh yeah. Everyone else I saw that article too. because one of the 6 companies that run the world wanted me to see it.
Right, yeah. And so it is just trying to, while our worlds revolve around technology a lot of times, you have to at some point realize that that's also not very good for you. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I got this phone, right? You know what Verizon introduced? Unlimited data.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to suck me back in.
Yep.
Like, oh, no, don't leave your phone. Now you can be on it unlimitedly. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
There's a band out of Atlanta called Paper Lights, really cool indie rock band. And I'm actually going to be, hopefully on Sunday, I'll be recording with them. But the reason I'm not sure when I'm going to record with them is that they just left today on a tour where they're going to go record their next album in all the national parks.
No.
Yeah, so they're going to Yellowstone and Yosemite and Joshua Tree, and they're just going off the grid in some van that they bought. And they literally, they got this idea, and they just started selling everything they could so that they could make this, they could take 6 months and go travel America and just, they're going to be recording sounds they hear out in nature and then sampling those as part of their album.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
And I just think, how cool is that we think, I got to have all this technology to be able to produce, what I want to produce, or I gotta be on Facebook because that's where everyone's at, and I gotta know what's going on in the world. And
Right.
then you have these guys, you got you getting a burner phone so that you can go out and actually enjoy life. And these guys are just hitting the road in a van to go discover, not because they've got a plan. They don't have 10 songs written yet.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, we're going to go out here and we're going to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think there will be some kind, whatever you want to call it, the next hipster movement or whatever is going to realize that we've lost something.
Right.
I can't I'm not communicating with anybody like in IRL anymore in real life. Let me go back. I think we'll see a resurgence. I hope we do.
Yeah.
I hope we do.
So let me ask you this: what? And this may go against what we're talking about here about like living life and
That's fine. I took us on that tangent. Sorry.
No. I'm just thinking, like, do you have any idea where you guys are headed next? Because being a manager and a visionary and this kind of stuff, you have to look ahead and think, okay, here's just like when you made the decision to say, okay, we're not going to do weddings anymore. That's not our focus. Right.
Yeah.
What's something you want to do or you want to create or you want to venture into that maybe you haven't done yet?
Sure. So I'm going to start with a story or two. So at our old house, the house we were in before this, I wanted a fireplace downstairs.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything. I mean, it's just a room with 4 walls. And so I went to this big fireplace. It was a gas log store. And they had, huge gas logs. And I was like, I want one of these. They were like, do you have an existing fireplace to put it in? And I said, well, no. And they said, well, you're going to have either that or you're going to have to build one. And I was like, well, do you guys have anyone that builds those? And they were like, no. And I looked over, and right beside us was one being built. Like exactly what I want. A fireplace being built out of stick and stone. And I was like, well, who's building that? And the guy was like, Jim, you know who's building this? And he was like, nah. And that was it. I walked out of the store. And like, same thing. We thought about building a pool in that same house. And the pool company came over and they're like, yeah, you're going to have, you got to legally put a fence around it and you got to get landscaping done. And I was like, well, do you guys have someone you use for that? And they were like, no.
What?
Like, who? So you guys don't have anyone you recommend for fencing? And they're like, nah, you could probably find someone on Google. It's like, oh my gosh. And so I realized that now that's happening more and more with video. When I was making videos 5 years ago, it'd be like, well, where do I put it? I'd be like, well, put it on your website or YouTube. And now when we make a video for people, it's like, well, I have 50 places to put it. Do I advertise on Hulu or Netflix or TV or Facebook or what do I do? And so now we're actually starting to do some social media, like management and we're actually building websites like with Squarespace.
Wow. Because
I didn't want people to come to us and us make videos and then we just hand them off and be like, where do I put it? Well, I don't know. Put it wherever you want. I wanted to kind of be that, and that's what we found is that a lot of the clients that we've had since day one trust us with videos, and if we can create a great website for them or create great social media content for them, then we want to do that out of that relationship. Like we want what's best for them. The farther we can make their videos go. So that's kind of where we're steering as a company a little bit, is to tackle some of that stuff as well.
That's really cool. And see that there's a need and to realize, hey, this is another opportunity for us to not only, keep paying our guys, but also to help people.
Yeah. That's what, websites always need updating. And what we're finding now is that websites are more of storefronts.
Right.
To prove that you're legit. And then most of the activity probably happens on some other channel.
And we've all seen websites that somebody 5 years ago spent tons of money producing, but didn't have the ability themselves to manage it. Right. And so, it's like you got 10-year-old tour dates and, no pictures.
Right. And that's so people the basis of it is people don't just need great content. They now need lots of it because you need to stay on the forefront of people's minds so we're doing pictures too. We've got, photography, videography. We kind of try to provide you with, we did a social media package for Captain Morgan.
Yeah.
Where we created like a bunch of GIFs and did pictures and we're going Saturday. We won some kind of an Addy award for it.
Oh, wow.
So that's the kind of stuff that's cool, is being able to provide a brand or a company like, here's 3 months worth of content
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it, you know.
That's brilliant.
Again, landed in our laps. I didn't quite go after it, you know. But now I'm pitching, and now I'm being like, "Hey, look, we did this for them. We can do this for you."
But I think that's one of the things that separates people who have achieved great success in any industry is that you recognized it. You maybe didn't, you know, you didn't plan it out and think about it ahead of time, but when it came along, you saw the opportunity, and you said, "Wow, that was a really cool one-time thing. What could we do to make that be a regular thing?" It's similar to like some of the greatest performing artists. They write this script and they take it on stage, and then something happens in the moment that's improvised, that wasn't planned. And they could just go, "Oh, that was funny that one time that happened." Or you go, "Okay, how can we shift the script so that's now part of the production?" You know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to ask, what do you do in your downtime? Do you normally does it drive you crazy, or do you use it? I now
edit podcasts.
Yeah.
So it's funny because my schedule tends to be either insanely busy or insanely open. And that's that's a very weird way to live. It's very strange. And you know how it is when you're doing event season. At an event, you're showing the video, then after that you're editing the video and you're staying up all night. You know what I mean? It's a very hectic schedule. So there's something weird when you go from, 3 months of not having a second to yourself to having 3 weeks of nothing.
Yeah.
And so honestly, this podcast has been very therapeutic for me, not just because of the conversations, but because it gives me something to focus my energy on when I'm not performing. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm at kind of a weird crossroads. I realized, and if people listen to this podcast, they're probably sick of me saying this, but it's just where I'm at. I'm kind of at this weird moment where I realized I am a full-time entertainer who doesn't have an audience. So because I perform for events and I do a lot of emceeing and comedy magic shows for corporations and things like that, the challenge with that is, number one, my material is always got to be designed for the audience I'm working for. So if GM brings me in, I'm not designing a show that I feel like may be the most creative show in the world or is something that is, addressing an issue that I'm really passionate about. It's going to be what works for a after dinner trade show.
Yeah.
And the other challenge with that is that I'm always, and I've seen this happen to so many guys who do what I do, is if you're an event entertainer, you're constantly waiting by the phone for someone to invite you to another event, so, you could have 4 months that are killer and you make more money than you've ever made in your life. But then if that 5th month no one needs you, you don't have an audience to reach out to perform for, so
yeah.
So the past 6 months have kind of been in this whirlwind of going, I love what I'm doing, and I love helping other people present their stories through the type of work that I do. And at the same time, I would also love to have a space where I could create some art just for people who want to see that.
Yeah.
Because this is the other thing too, is that event entertainers, no one came to see your show. You're always, which is sometimes it's a pleasant surprise and it's fun and you get to win an audience over. But I did an event 2 nights ago at the Anaheim Convention Center. It was part of this huge corporate convention. People flew in from all over the country. We had a great time and it was fun, but no one came to see the show. And there's always a difference there.
Well, I think it is odd that a lot of times people, I'm sure you get comments at Christmas or whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so nice that you're full time with this and you're established." And I always get weirded out by that word established, because I'm like,
no.
What?
No.
I'm still waiting just like everybody else on like that next call.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. I remember watching, I think it was a documentary on Joan Rivers, and this was toward the end of her life, and they said, "What scares you?" And she said, "Let me show you." And she walked over to her desk and pulled out her calendar, and she turned the page, and it was just full, just chock full. And she turned the page again, and it was chock full. And she turned the page again, and it was empty. And she said, "That's the scariest thing in the world." Because that means no one wants me. And I was just like, "Oh, you get it, Joan Rivers."
Yeah, I mean, and to think of someone like that, I mean, it's across the scale. But I feel like even when people are first starting out, like there is that fear, like, I don't have anything on the books. But then you think like Joan Rivers, it's okay. She doesn't either.
Right. That is one of the weird challenges too of what we do is that you don't, no one's paying you a salary. You're paying a salary for 19 people, not to scare you, but I mean like, you've got to go out and get the work to bring in the money.
Similar to what you did with your podcast, we started something called Lou's Brother. I don't know if you've seen it or not. We haven't really launched it per se yet, but it was this. The name comes from one of our first trips to up north. We were waiting to hear that accent, that classic northern accent.
Yeah.
We pulled up in an Outback parking lot and we heard somebody, hey, it's Lou's brother, like Italian New York. Hey, it's Lou's brother. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, Lou's brother. And that was it. So the name kind of, it's a place, it's a company for the people of Let People See to push their talents and do passion projects, and some for fun and some for inspiration.
Oh, that's cool.
We just did a film called Throw Up. It's kind of a basketball film, but it wouldn't necessarily look good to the corporate clients to Let People See. They'd be like, what? I don't get it. But we created this other space where it was safe to explore some of these things.
That's so good, Chris. Because that's where I'm at right now is I feel like personally I have things that I want to do that just don't work in a corporate setting.
Right.
and not only that, but I have some things that are raw, not in a edgy way, but they're raw because they haven't been worked out. And there is this element of I can't get up at a corporate event where they're paying me a good fee and do something I don't know if it's going to work. Like I feel like I need to create a less pressurized environment to be creative.
Yeah, you need a Lou's brother.
I need a Lou's brother.
But you ought to check it out. It's pretty fun. And that's
how do they get to it?
You can go to lousbrother.com.
Lou's Brother, and that's Lous?
Yes, yeah. And we haven't, the short film is on there. We haven't officially launched it yet, which is fine. We just got it there. But you can see it's a place for Let People See employees to do some of these things. And there's the fine line between, because we're still paying them. So what can they create that's also might be valuable to us in the future? If it's messing with, 360 stuff or even just doing passion projects like we did, like an elf, like making the elf spaghetti recipe.
Yeah.
That's on there, but it was because we wanted to experiment with all these tasty videos that are going crazy.
Awesome. You guys, check it out. Check out lousbrother.com and check out Let People See.
Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you guys for a project or reach out to you about something they're working on, what's the best way for them to do that? Is that through your website? Is that through Facebook? How do people get you?
Yeah, usually, either hello at Let People See,
okay,
or Chris at letpeoplesee.com comes to me. Or call. And that's the kind of fun part is we just do whatever the client likes best. If they're a caller, then we hop on the phone. If they'd like to text, then we text all day long.
That's great.
If they like to Facebook or email, whatever, we just enjoy where we don't make them come to. We prefer email, and that's the way you should,
Because you don't want to be the fireplace guy who goes, I don't know who's making that one.
Right. Where'd I put the video? I don't know, man. Just put it on YouTube and it'll do something.
Chris, thank you so much, man. Thank you for sharing this. We're gonna keep talking. We got to talk about how we're gonna hang in Napa, and I gotta pick your brain some more too, because I've got like 10 things that you mentioned in this podcast that are wrecking me right now. So, dude, thank you, man. Thanks for sharing your heart. Everybody, go check out Let People See. Check out Lou's Brother. And also check out Chris on Instagram and Facebook. He's got some fun pictures.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Taylor, for having me. This has been great. This has been awesome.